morning, everybody.
Good morning.
If you don't know me, I'm Rick. I am a teacher by profession and a disciple called by God, which is an amazing thing that we're able to do. God set up, God chose His family, the Israelites, His people, to kind of watch over. And the Old Testament is about that. It's about how God kind of leads His people that He loves and so dearly cares about, and how they keep turning away. And I think a lot of us can relate that right to our lives, especially if we think about our lives in terms of camp. Those of you that have been here a few years, how as you're going through camp, it's like you come back to camp the next year and it feels like we're hitting the same problems again. And if we look through the Old Testament, we read back through the Scripture, and we keep seeing the Israelites, and they strayed away from God, and they did things that were ungodly, and they did things that were displeasing to the sight of God. And we keep hearing this, and I think part of us gets frustrated with them, and we're like, come on, like, get it, like, look, like, God was right here. He came shooting fire down from the mountain, right, to burn the offering. He parted the waters so that you could get away from Egypt. And in fact, the people that actually saw that were the same people that were grumbling, God, why did you lead us here into the desert? And I think a lot of times if we do a little bit of reflection and are honest with ourselves and can put the earbuds and the phones away for a half a minute and let ourselves just be in our own heads for a half a minute, we can see ourselves in that. Unfortunately, where we go with that is not running to God, but spinning down the spiral of depression instead. And I think one of the things that has helped me, because that is in my family tree, that's depression, bipolar disorder, and all that. One of the things that has helped me is to constantly stay in the Bible. And as I'm reading, where is God in this? How do I see God in this? Right? Because the Bible is not a historical index. It is not an exact replica of exactly how things happen. And that's where people get tripped up a lot, I think. It's not a story about that. It's a story about God's love.
Right.
So, because you guys know poetry, you guys know songs. Any Eminem fans out here? Right? I like listening to him. There's a lot of his lyrics that a lot of his fans take seriously, right? And he's come out on several occasions saying, "No, that's just how I feel inside. That's how a lot of this feels." He hasn't done some of the stuff he has, but there's a lot of stuff that he has not done that he puts into his lyrics, right? But it's poetry. And I'm not saying everything in the Bible is not legit and actual and factual, because that's definitely there. But there's a good chunk of the Bible that's poetry. It's these utterances of people's souls and how they see God and how God interacts with them, and God has put it upon them to speak in those ways. Now, none of this is actually on this paper that's sitting in front of me, but I think that that's a great lead-in to the fact that we are spending a lot of our time in the Old Testament. And we see this powerful, fearsome, angry, in some cases it seems, God. And how can that be the same one that sent His Son, so that we, who are not Israelites, can still be a part of that family? Right? Which is such a crazy, crazy notion at that time. So we're diving all the way back into Judges. So if you don't have to have your Bibles in front of you, but if you're one of those people that likes to have that and kind of see where I'm pulling stuff from, we're back where we were studying this morning, Judges 13, chapters 13 through 16. And that's kind of where we're landing. So you're welcome to leave that there. If you're taking notes, just kind of jot that at the top. I take picture notes. When I take notes, I draw pictures and then throw little words beside the pictures, because I'm a visual learner. In school, that's what I did. Some of my teachers hated it. Some of my teachers were like, that's amazing. That's what I do. However you do it, to keep it here so you can reference it later, is going to be super, super beneficial. Now, there's two great stories in my book, and they all stem from all other stories stem from these two stories. One is the greatest love story, and that is the story of Jesus and how God brought redemption to the people. Fascinating, amazing story. And most of you are kind of getting in tune with that if you're not already in tune with that. The other super fantastic, amazing story is the story of Star Wars, because that is the best series out there. I grew up with it. I was born the year that Return of the Jedi came out, so I watched it in syndication. I was not fortunate enough to be born in the 70s, but it's okay. I absolutely follow, I love it. I don't know, I'm not like devoted to it, but I love it. It's interesting to me. My little 7-year-old boy loves it, and we talk a lot about it. And so, as I was preparing for today's message, I'm like, Star Wars, right? Because you guys, most of you are probably at least quasi-familiar with it, at least the characters. Now, one of my not-so-favorite elements... Oh, you know what? Real quick. I need you to turn to your neighbor and say, get ready for this. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Now turn to the neighbor you don't like as much and say, get ready for this. Alright. I think we're good now. I think we're good. So, because I've got something prepared for you, and the more I've got to talk to a few of you this week, the more excited I am because this stuff keeps coming up, which is so cool. So I think is really going to affect a lot of you, which is, I'm so super excited about. So the story of Star Wars. As much as I hate to, I'm going to add the prequels in because what I feel is that the story of Star Wars at this point is about Anakin Skywalker, right? Darth Vader eventually. Sorry to spoil that. So he's this little guy. He's on the planet of Tatooine, and he has so much midichlorians in his system, right? Us as Christians will say he has so much potential, right? Or just as a society, he was like heightened. He was set apart to do great things. He was set apart according to Qui-Gon Jinn to bring balance to the Force, right? So he had a ton of weight on his shoulders. Now he didn't know that until he was a little bit older, right? And then these Jedi guys come and they're like, oh, you got to come train with us, right? And so he trains and he works hard, and he's under direct supervision of another great Jedi, Obi-Wan Kenobi, eventually, right? And he's training and he's training, and he's just like, this potential is just growing and growing and growing, right? And if you watch like the Clone Wars series, you get to see some of that when he's younger. But then something happens. Something that goes against his moral code, his moral structure, enters into the scene, right? In the form of Senator Palpatine, right? Which is, spoiler alert, the Emperor, right? I didn't give you guys time to earmuffs, right? So he's sitting there and he's letting this dude like spill untruth, right? Spill these lies, spill these very selfish thoughts into his head. Okay? And he's perpetuating these, what we'll call them weaknesses, that were in Anakin. And then we see that eventually he gets to this place where the Emperor has spilled enough lies and deceit into his head that he starts believing those to be true. Okay? And we get the kind of the fall of Anakin Skywalker, right? And then after that we have this kind of life of treachery, this life of hate and anger, right? And then at the very end of his life, we have this turnaround, this moment of redemption, right? He sees the love that he had buried deep inside of him for another person. Is something that's like a big spoiler. Go on. But if you don't know it, get ready for this. Get ready. If you've not watched it, earmuffs. Luke Skywalker is Darth Vader's son. So, I apologize to those of you that ruined everything. I didn't tell my son about that the first time we watched the movie, and like I'm just like watching him during the part, like I'm not even watching the movie, and then like he's like, and like turns and looks at me, and I'm like, it was an amazing moment. Okay, so what's really cool is that story. Like when I was reading through Judges 13 to 16, the story of Samson, Sorry, Samson. The story of Samson. I was like, these things relate so well to each other. It's like, it was really cool how they parallel. I'm pretty sure that George Lucas just read Judges 13 through 16 and then made that movie. We are all, and I don't know if you guys realize that, but we are all like predestined to be great. Okay? Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, said the Lord. Right? Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you hope in the future. Like you're all, whether you grew up in a really crappy home life, whether your parents are just not awesome, or whether they're the most awesome people in the world and you think you got it all set up and you don't need other people, you don't need God. No matter what situation you find yourselves in, you're all predestined for something great. You're set up to be great. And it's up to us to try and run that race. So we're talking about Samson. He was predestined. You guys read this morning that his mom was barren. She couldn't have children. Messenger of the Lord came to her and basically told you, look, you're going to have a child. He's going to be a Nazarite, which basically means somebody that is set up to serve God, basically. So while he was in the womb, and that she was not to drink, right, or touch anything that was dead, right, because that was a major element of that society at that point. And then once he was born, he was not to ever drink, and he was not to ever shave his head or touch anything that was deceased. Okay, it was just kind of like this set apart, holy person that was going to do great things for God. And at this point, we have what are called the judges, which is why the books are called the Judges, right? And these are people that weren't like kings or anything like that, but they helped lead God's people and generally direct what God was kind of wanting them to do, okay? Because there's a lot of fighting and battling during this time, so they helped kind of lead that sort of thing. And Samson, until he was a little bit older, had no idea about his predestined nature. He just knew that he was set apart, I think, for something. We all think, when we think of Samson, we think of what? Strong, right? Strong like bull. We think of him as like super duper strong, right? Well, he didn't know that. Okay, he didn't know that growing up that's what was going to happen to him. Okay, he was just a fairly regular kid that just didn't cut his hair. Okay, because they probably weren't drinking a whole lot at that point, and I'm guessing he wasn't running around touching dead things. So at this point, he doesn't know a whole lot about his life, similar to what I was talking about earlier, the Anakin kind of on Tatooine, like, and the Jedi come and like rock his world, right? Well, one day, Samson was like walking down this lane. I believe he was on his way to meet his wife, so he's a little bit older. And this lion jumps out and attacks him, and the Spirit of God, right, because he's set apart and God has big plans for him. The Spirit of God comes on him, and he like catches the lion and then like rips the lion in half. Right? Not like little like fuzzy baby lion, right? This is like big old like Maine lion, right? And he just rips this thing in half, and he's like, what? Right? Like picture that. Like you're walking to chapel and the lion jumps and runs out and like is jumping at you, and you're just like, catch, rip. Right? And what do the people around you like doing, right? Like back away.
You're weird.
So like this happens, and then all of a sudden, kind of what Samson's purpose starts to rest on him, and he knows what he is called to do. Because you see, just like we were talking in the story about Gideon, the Israelites again were being oppressed. This time by the Philistines. And Samson was the one who was going to bring Israel back out of that bondage. Weird story. This kind of story takes a weird turn with what's not already weird enough. Inside of the lion was a beehive and honey. That's normal, right? And weirder yet, Samson walks over and just sticks his hand up in there like, honey. I'm like, all right. Samson's a weird dude. But at this point, what has he done? Here's kind of the first time that I saw this in here, where we see this kind of rebellious nature of Samson. Okay? Because at this point he knows he's a Nazirite, so he knows not to do that. So it's not like he was unaware of that. He knew that that was something he shouldn't do. Right? But he let that start to is that first time the emperor talked to Anakin thing? He just let that one little thing slide. Okay? He went into town to meet, actually to get married to a Philistine woman, right? And he in his head is thinking, well, this is a way that I can infiltrate the Philistine army and maybe start to take them out from the inside, right? So he marries this Philistine woman, and kind of in the process he makes a pretty high wager with some Philistines that they have to guess his riddle. Okay, and I apologize, I didn't write the riddle down, but it has something to do. What is strong, and then something found inside is sweet. Is basically the idea of the. It's a very short little riddle. It's in the book. If you have your Bible right in front of you, you can probably see that. But just this little riddle. But we see this kind of cocky nature now, kind of showing up in Samson, right? And he makes this little riddle with the Philistine army. Or some soldiers from the Philistines, and he leaves. He says, you guys have 7 days to answer this. When I come back, if you can't answer it, I'm going to basically have to give me a whole bunch of stuff. It's worth a lot of money. And so he goes back, he's hanging out with his wife. Well, some of the Philistines had approached his wife and were like, look, we can't figure out this riddle, and it's because of you, and so we are going to burn you and your father if you do not tell us the answer. And she's like, I don't know the answer. And so she runs to Samuel. She runs to Samson. And she's like, hey, please tell me the answer to the riddle. And he's like, look, my parents don't even know. This is my secret. And she keeps begging and pleading and begging and pleading and nagging, right? And it's like when you know you're not supposed to be doing something, but it sticks in the back of your head, right? And eventually it's like, I can't take it anymore, I'm going to go do that thing, right? That I shouldn't be doing. Okay? That was happening to Samson. And so he finally tells her. She runs and tells these Philistines, to save her own hide, to save her parents' hide. And when Samson comes back into town, they're basically like, a lion and honey. And he's like, what? You have tricked me. You have used my wife against me. And he gets super angry, and he goes to the next village over, kills a whole bunch of people so that he can pay the debt, and then goes and mopes. And during that time, his dad's like, well, I guess he probably doesn't like his wife anymore, so, hey, wife, you go be with this other person. And he basically gives Samson's wife away. When Samson kind of comes to, a little bit, he goes to talk to his wife, and dad's like, oh, I already gave her away. And so he gets super ticked off, and then he ties a bunch of foxes' tails together with torches and sends them out into the Philistine fields. Now, I don't know if you've ever done that before. That's something that maybe you guys have done. But if you do that, try it sometime. What happens is that those foxes run everywhere, right? And they hide in the hay bales, they hide in the barns and different things like that. And those torches start lighting everything on fire, right? So they're taking out all of the Philistine resources, and they are ticked. Let's keep this moving a little bit, because you can read a lot of this for yourself, which is pretty amazing. Philistines get ticked. They kind of lay into the Israelites. The Israelites grab Samson, tie him up with ropes, and he's like, oh no. And they take him and they set him in the middle of this Philistine army. I think it's 1,000 soldiers, right? And they're about to basically kill him because they're strong. They're scared of his strength. And then he's basically like, boop, and all the ropes just fall off of him, and he's like, ooh, donkey bone, fresh donkey bone. He picks up the donkey bone and he kills all 1,000 people. It's a donkey's jawbone. Like, who does that? Right? What? Samson. Yeah, Samson does that. But again, we keep seeing this this reoccurring theme with Samson, because shortly after this, he gets together with another Philistine woman who this time has ulterior motives right off the bat. Okay, she's getting paid, and she gets married to Samson, and her name's Delilah. And how many of you know this story a little bit? Right, yeah, that's good. If you don't, what happens is Delilah keeps trying to find out Samson's secret to his strength, because you see the Philistines are terrified of him. And here's the interesting thing to me is that when I was reading this, I'm sitting there like, okay, she asked him the secret to his strength. He told her a lie, because he's not supposed to tell anybody, right? He told her a lie. And so he like wakes up in the morning and he's got ropes wrapped around him, and there's soldiers in his room. He's like, breaks the ropes, kills the soldiers. At that point, I'm going to be like, last night, pretty sure I told Delilah that that's my weakness. That's probably just coincidence. He lets her hang around. He's like, it's all. She keeps nagging him, right? And he keeps telling her these falsehoods, and centurions keep coming into the room, and he finds himself bound in some way in the morning, or his hair's like in a loom, and like I don't know about you, but I've never like fallen asleep and I wake up and my hair's stuck in a loom. Like, I mean, maybe some of you. Gideon probably, he's got that long hair. But that's never happened to me before, and so I would be a little bit suspicious, just a little bit. But what's the strangest thing to me is that he doesn't do anything about it. And I was sitting there thinking so much, like, why is he not, like, hit the road, Jack? See ya, or Delilah. Like, what's up with this? And I came to the conclusion. He knew he was predestined. He knew he had something going for him. He knew he was strong. He knew that he killed 1,000 people with a donkey's fresh jawbone. I'm guessing that he's like, I got this. I can handle this on my own. That's what I'm guessing. I'm not sure why we do that, but I think a lot of us do that in our own lives. We sit there and we see something that we know is not right. We sit there and we know that there's this thing in our life, whether we want to face it or not, and we hang on to that, and we let that thing just kind of sit there, sit in front of us, and we're like, I can handle it. We know that we use our phone for things that we shouldn't be using our phone for, especially after the hour of 10 o'clock at night, right? But for some reason, we take our phone to bed with us every night. Because we can handle it. Right? Some of you have substance abuse. Alcohol, weed, I don't know. I can handle it. I know when to stop. I just do it on the weekends. Right? We let it hang around. And you know what's the crazy thing is, you know in your head it's wrong. You know stories of how those things have turned wrong. But you let it hang around because you think, I got this. And I got to think that that's what Samson was thinking when he clearly had to have known that Delilah was after him. So, eventually he tells Delilah the true answer is that if his head is shaved, he loses all of his strength. And of course he wakes up the next morning and head is shaved. He sees the guards in front of him. He jumps up. He's ready to take him out, and nothing. Right? He's like a normal man at this point. Lost all his strength, and I gotta imagine where his heart is at this point. And I think some of you have been there, where that sin that you've been able to manage, you wake up one day and you're like, nope, it's managing me. Right? I know I've been there. And it's a crushing feeling. And at that point, you're just sitting there like, what do I do? At this point, I'm so far in, I don't even know where to go. I know where the root of the problem was, but I don't even know how to get back there anymore. A couple verses that popped into my head during this, and then keep moving here. The wages of sin is death. And that verse, I've always just that first part there, I've always thought it to mean like, we sin, we die, we don't get to be with God anymore. Right? That's where I started with that. And kind of where I kind of started to come to this week a little bit while thinking through that, and I was like, why did that pop into my head? I don't think it just has to do with that. I think it has to do with our daily lives as well. If you guys are living in something you know you're not supposed to be doing, if you're living in, and that's not even doing, some of you it's not a physical thing, some of you it's a mental thing. If you let yourself sit there and think those bad thoughts about yourself, if you sit there and let yourself think that you're like, why can't I be more like that person? You know, why can't I be that? God, why do you hate me? Why can't I do that? And it's just this nasty downward spiral, and we let that sit there, and we let that fester, and I think that is a ramification. I think that is a result of a previous sin. And what's crazy to me is that Jesus came down as the perfect sacrifice so that we didn't have to deal with any of that. But like, we want to deal with it. Like, we act like we want to deal with it. We act like it's safe in those troubled areas. We act like that thing that even though that's something that I shouldn't be about, we act like that's our identity, and we kind of live there. Because it feels safe, because it's normal, because it's what I've only known. I know depression. I know how people treat me during depression. Right? Especially when you come to camp and everybody's all lovey on you and it makes you feel good. So if I act depressed, maybe somebody will give me attention. I think there's a part of us that is almost like scared to leave the chaos. We're scared to kind of leave that because that's who we are, that's what we know, that's what we're about. Why would I want to leave that? Because then maybe God's not going to allow me to be who I want to be. God promised, and I had you guys read this morning. God promised Samson right off the bat, you're going to do great things. You are going to destroy the Philistines and bring the people of Israel out of bondage. And I had you guys read the last verse, where that happened, right? Samson pulled down the columns. All of the major people of the Philistine army were crushed, plus many, many, many more. He actually killed more people then than he did his whole life as a military leader. What's crazy to me is, that's what God promised, that's what happened, right? But why did the middle have to look like it did?
That's right.
Right? If God has promised that you are going to directly affect the lives of hundreds and hundreds of people, right? Maybe he's not setting, maybe he wants you to do that, but you're sitting there on your butt or on your phone or thinking about this other thing. And so he's like, well, they're not doing anything with it. Here's some offspring. Maybe your offspring can do something about that now. Because the thing is, and this is a hard pill to swallow, but this is one of those pills I had to kind of like figure out myself. God doesn't need us. He loves us. He wants us. But if he has something that he wants to get done, he's going to find a way to do that. Okay? I personally want to be that tool that he gets to use. Okay? So, why I want to be blessed by that. I mean, I hope that doesn't come across as selfish, but I want to be that, right? God's going to bring about what he wants to bring about because he's God. I would love for everybody in here to get off your butt, take that one thing that's holding you back, get rid of it, so that you can be that person that gets to bless everybody. Right? After Samson was captured, they gouged his eyes out. I've never dealt with blindness or having my eyes gouged out, thankfully. I gotta imagine that's not fun to any extent. You gotta think that his whole life things are going well for him. He's got crazy strength. He could probably get most ladies that he would want. You know, so like as far as this world goes, he's going to be pretty set, right? He's in charge of a whole bunch of men in his army. Things are looking pretty good. He lets something hang around that shouldn't have been hanging around. He wakes up one day and everything's gone. He can't see, he has no strength anymore, and he's in bondage. The Philistines hooked him up basically to a mill. If you've seen Conan the Barbarian, it's the same kind of thing. If you've not, go see it, maybe, when you're older. Much older. But he's basically turning this giant mill, making grain. Every day. Going around in a circle. Hey, guess what? The wages of sin is death. If you let those stupid things in your life keep hanging around, and we have to come back here and deal with it every stinking year, you guys are only spinning around in a circle for somebody else. What's going on in Samson's heart at this point? I had it all. I screwed it up. Let me read you this poem real quick. Save me, God, because the waters have reached my neck. I've sunk into the deep mud, but my feet can't even touch the bottom. I've entered the deep water. The floods are sweeping me away. How many of you have felt that? I'm tired of crying. My throat is hoarse. My eyes are exhausted with waiting for you. Insults from all around me are breaking me. I'm sick. I hoped for sympathy. I didn't get it. I hoped for comfort, but I couldn't find any. God, let your salvation keep me safe. I hate my enemies, but I want... I hate my enemies, but I want the best for them. I'll praise God's name with a song. Let all who see this be glad. All you who seek, let your hearts be strong again. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that. That's from Psalms. Psalms are powerful. Jesus every day would study the Psalms. Put them in your heart. It's not just scripture to read through. This is somebody's guttural cry to God. If we sit here and read scripture like it's English class, that's not going to do anything for you. Okay? Take that back. The devotion of that, God will honor that. Okay? and He will speak through that. But when are you going to take that to the next level? Let me say it that way. Okay? When are you going to take this and actually put it in here instead of just leaving it up here? That was Psalm 69, if you guys ever want to go back and read that. You're allowed to cry out to God. You're allowed to be angry at God. You're allowed to yell. What's so amazing is that if you've accepted Christ in your heart, and you know what, I got to think even if you haven't, the Holy Spirit can translate. He knows what those words coming out of your mouth actually mean. He knows where that hurt is actually coming from. And He intercedes with God for us. So cry out to Him. Take your burden, whatever that might be. And I know it's scary. Some of you, that's all you know. Because you've let yourself build up so many walls, and I started to identify yourself with that hurt, that like that's who you are. And if we give that up, then we don't know who we are anymore. And that's scary. But like give it up to Him. If we let it stay, it's only going to bring about death in your lives. I don't remember if Ryan shared this with everybody, but I think it's so important to seek out people to talk to about this. I think when we allow our mouths to speak as opposed to letting it stay up here, it's so much more powerful. And I don't mean talking to your peers. Seek out somebody that you know has big faith, like we talked about in class yesterday. Because it's our jobs to live for something greater than what you guys are currently living for. Us. At this point, that's about all that I wanted to share, I think, today. What I'd like for you guys to do, like absolute quiet, Cole's going to come up and help fill that silence just a little bit for me. But I think, what is that wall? What is that thing you're scared to turn and look at? What's the thing that's trapping you? Because if you don't give that up, things aren't going to get better. And you're only going to become more and more and more bitter towards God. Because you're not going to see healing. But all He wants you to do is turn around and give it back to Him. Because He already took it on the cross. But for some reason we're trying to hang on to it. So I would like you guys to stay in silence. I want you to really ponder on that. I want you to really seriously think about that. What's that thing that's standing in your way that's allowing, or that's preventing you from becoming great?
Come on.
Because it's time to stop being childish, and it's time to start being great.
Amen.
Crazy thing about the Bible is that there's simple truths in there, but we fight and we fight and we fight. We shadow box the air because we don't even know what we're fighting against anymore. Just let it go. Take a couple minutes. Internalize this. As you feel like you can start to let some of that go, you guys are welcome to slowly leave. Quietly, please. Be respectful of people in here, because I know this message touched a couple people. Alright. Dear Lord, thanks for being with us today. I pray that your word just sits on these kids' hearts. I pray that it sits on counselors' hearts and staff's hearts. Let it not die here, but continue to work in their brains past camp, past the ride home, past summer, past school. God, I want so much for these kids to come back next year fully changed. At least one step ahead.